Hello everyone and welcome in for this dreary day, which is perfect for the book that we're talking about because today we are talking about an alleged horror book. I mean, I suppose it kind of has to be classified as horror because I'm not entirely certain what else I would classify it as, so we'll leave it in the horror category. I just didn't find it terribly scary. But this book was a recommendation, again, from a patron of mine. Just a reminder that on Patreon, at a certain level, you get to boss me around, which means that you get to help me decide what books I should review. So you can suggest books. I do have veto rights, but usually I'll try my best to get to the book that you recommend. This one was a recommendation from a patron who loves a good horror story and knows that I do too. And we had talked about how horror books are really good ways to explore grief. And the patron then suggested this book, which is called Crossroads, because that's what it is. It's a horror book that is about grieving and grief, and they were hoping that perhaps I would really enjoy it. And the good news for them is I didn't hate it. I just didn't love it either. I have more complaints than I have things that I love, so I gave it 3 stars. It's right in the middle. Sorry if my lighting is weird. I usually have natural light, but it's really dreary today, so this is what we have. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. That's what I always say, while simultaneously throwing a fit. So let's read the blurb of Crossroads and then we'll talk more about it. It is a nice short read, so this might be a shorter video, but hopefully you'll find enough for us to talk about to make it worth our while. Hello, Nigel. Nigel is here. The blurb on Goodreads goeth thusly. How far would you go to bring back someone you love? When Chris's son dies in a tragic car crash, her world is devastated. The walls of grief close in on Chris's life until, one day, a small cut on her finger changes everything. A drop of blood falls from Chris's hands onto her son's roadside memorial, and later that night, Chris thinks she sees his ghost outside her window. Only, is it really her son's ghost, or is it something else? Something evil. Soon, Chris is playing a dangerous game with forces beyond her control in a bid to see her son, Trey, alive once again. There he is. There's the boy. You can mostly see his tail. So, pretty straightforward, honestly. For a shorter book, that's not surprising. A woman's son dies in a tragic and mysterious car crash that, they kind of make a big deal of it being a weird crash, a weird accident, and I'm not sure if that's meant to tie in with the story or not. It's entirely possible that it is, because the whole theme of this story is, the crossroads and evil things that can happen there, and specifically, crossroads demons do feature heavily into this story, so perhaps the crash itself was supernaturally caused, but if you're looking for a book that has a lot of answers, this is not the book for you. You, like me, may very well leave this book with more questions than answers. If my lipstick is disappearing, it's because I'm drinking water. Anyway, so obviously, as usual, I'm going to be spoiling the hell out of this book, so if you liked the sound of that blurb and you want to get in on this book yourself, now's the time to go read it because I'm going to spoil everything. Our scene is set. We have Chris, who is a mother. She is separated from her husband. They've been separated for a while. He has a whole other family with stepchildren with his new wife, and she feels that he is living very happily. Whether she's correct about his, level of happiness, this book is very, very heavily in her point of view and clouded by her point of view, which is something that I like because between the lines you can tell that she's wrong about many things, including her opinion of her ex-husband sometimes. But this woman is still grieving her son, who was actually either an older teen or a full adult. He was still living at home, but he was not a little child. He's a fully grown person at this point. Which surprised me. The blurb made it seem like he was going to be a bit younger. In the blurb, it says he died in a crash, but that doesn't imply that he was driving the car, which he actually was in the book. So I was not necessarily expecting her son to be as old as he was, which was interesting. But she's, completely devastated by his loss, and she visits his crash site frequently. Instead of his grave site, she prefers to visit his crash site to leave, they've got one of those little crosses there, one of those little markers that they put by roadside death sites. So she goes there and she leaves little tokens and stuff like that. And this time she accidentally bleeds there and summons something. And at first I was really intrigued because this is the second story that I've read this year that implies that ghosts might need blood to maintain themselves. But actually it turns out that it wasn't a ghost that she summoned, but in fact probably a Crossroads demon. There's even references to a TV show she watches that references Crossroads demons, which I think is a play on Supernatural.
I want to play guitar. I want you to make me the best blues man ever lived.
Supernatural or all of those silly ghost hunting shows that are on TV, or both. Kind of maybe a combination of both. So she bleeds in the spot, and then she had been thinking about her son because she does this thing where she imagines that her son is kind of always with her. She visualizes him there. She imagines that he's talking back. She's a very, very strong imagination. And just, quite frankly, a lot of denial going on in her heart. So she cuts herself while very strongly imagining that her son is there. And as a result, that night, she looks out her bedroom window in the middle of the night and sees her son very much physically there in like the driveway. And what she sees him for several nights, and for a while she doesn't dare approach. She just looks at him through the window. She's thrilled to see him, and she's like doesn't want to mess it up. Eventually she goes down to see him because he is like coming around less and less. And now we run into the problem that I have with this character that frustrated me the most, because she kind of she's one of those characters who decides something must be true and runs with it without ever interrogating whether it's actually true or not, without ever stopping to think, hey, maybe I'm wrong. So she goes down to greet her son, and he's like, yeah, I am fading you. Whatever you did to get me here, you need to do it more or something. Like, he's very vague. He doesn't give her specifics for reasons. And she is the one who mostly comes out, like he gives her the barest suggestion that maybe, not positively, not certainly, maybe the things she needs to do is make more sacrifices. And she takes that and she runs with it. She's like, that's clearly the answer. That must be the answer. I have to make more sacrifices because I bled the first time, so I have to do more. And I would be fine with this if there was ever any evidence that that was succeeding. And I think this is where the author misstepped just slightly, because I would be here with the character believing that she believed this if the first time she made a larger sacrifice, because she goes and she bleeds in the spot again, but to a much larger extent. This book is mostly body horror. There's very little other types of horror. It's mostly body horror. So she goes and she bleeds on the site again, and what I would have done is have that work at first. Have the son be back at full potential after she bleeds more on the site. And she's like, yes, this is more sacrifices is indeed what is required to keep my son here. But in reality, she performs this sacrifice and then several subsequent escalating sacrifices, and it's not working. And she just determines for no good goddamn reason that she's just not trying hard enough. She needs to sacrifice more when it is clear that that's not working. And if this is a demon, which to me it very clearly seems to be, wouldn't it behoove the demon to draw her along by letting her sacrifices seem like they're working at first, so she wants to make bigger and bigger ones until the ultimate ending where she makes the biggest sacrifice? One would think that would be the way to go, but the demon didn't even have to do that because this woman is willing to just start lopping pieces off of her body with no evidence whatsoever that that will succeed. And that's what drove me the craziest about this story. I get it. I get what we're going for, the grief, and the theme is huge in this book of sacrifices that mothers make. It's a very overt theme in this book. I would even say that that was more of a theme than the grief, is mothers' sacrifices. But just give her a little bit of a carrot at the end of the stick to make her think that making more sacrifices is the right choice. That's all I'm asking. Just a little bit of something. Let it, that first time that she does it, let her succeed. So she just thinks, I need to go bigger. I need to go bigger every time. And even when it stops working, when she's escalating and it stops working, if it had worked that first time, that would be enough to get her to go, I need to go bigger, I need to go bigger. I'm just not going big enough. The other thing that this book did was that it has a very, very small cast. And so our lead character, yes, she has a job, but in the course of this book, we don't really have to worry or concern ourselves with the job. And she has one friend, her next door neighbor, who she also forms a romantic attachment to. However, her world is very, very small. So there's nobody to give her the verbal smackdown and tell her that she's being stupid. And even her neighbor guy, he's simping. He's simping too hard. He's like, well, whatever she's doing, cutting pieces off of herself, I support her because I love her. And I'm like, oh God. If this woman had had any support, which I guess could potentially be another theme, that mothers don't have enough support, but also she's isolating herself. So it's a little bit like therapy. Go to therapy. She's really not keen on therapy. I think it even says in the book that she says in the book that she's not interested in therapy. She latches onto one thing as the way to solve this problem of her son fading away again, and she just does not ever consider that there might be something else going on. Or when she does, she very swiftly dismisses it like, well, but it's my son, so I have to. And I get it, but like this book just needed a little bit extra to push me over the edge to believing that she would do this stuff. It would have taken so little, but as it was, I had a really hard time believing that somebody could be this stupid. Even a grieving mother. No, I have never been a grieving mother, but I have lost people that I loved in my life and would very dearly love to see them again, but not to the point where I'm stupid. Maybe you have to be a grieving mother. I don't know. Maybe I just can't speak to it. And perhaps if you are a grieving mother, this book will hit you harder than it hit me. But then again, if you are a grieving mother, you might not want to read this book. Like I said, though, one of the main themes of this book is mother's sacrifice. And I liked it, but I'm not sure that it quite hit. I feel like it was this close to hitting for me and didn't quite get there. Because we have her juxtaposed against her own mother, who is a narcissist. And her own mother is kind of the voice in the back of her head, reminding our main character how her own mother used to use sacrifice as a weapon. So the evil mother would be like, I sacrificed so much for you, you ungrateful child. And she would wield that as a weapon. So the main character is like, I will sacrifice selflessly. I will never do that. I will sacrifice forever and ever without making my child feel guilty about it. Which is also toxic, and I think that's what the author was going for. Both of these types of sacrifice are toxic. Ultimately, at the very end of the book, I think that the message that we were going for is that, huge spoilers, she eventually sacrifices her life, even though at one point she made it clear that she had no intention of doing that. But then all of a sudden she just switches gears and she's like, well, she gets into her head somehow, some way, and again, I don't know how or why. But at some point, she starts believing that if she sacrifices enough, she will resurrect her son. And it is pretty unclear to me why she thinks that. But she's like, I just have to sacrifice more and more and I can resurrect him. And eventually, somehow she gets it in her head that she needs to sacrifice herself so that he can be resurrected. But at the very, very end, the last sting of the book is that what she resurrected, her son, is not. It's not her. It's very much giving Pet Sematary. Like, he came back wrong and he didn't want to be there as a horrifying creature. So I think the ending message of the book is that it is toxic for mothers to feel that they need to sacrifice everything up to and including their lives for their children. But it just didn't quite land. I think that last sting needed a little bit more for me personally. Or I would have loved a little bit more introspection from the main character. I think the main character's just like idiotic single-mindedness was what really messed with it for me. And like I said, it would have been so easy to convince me if we had just done like a couple of things very slightly different in this book. I could have been convinced that she fully believes that she needs to sacrifice her life for her son, even though at one point in this pretty short book, she was saying, I will never sacrifice my life. Like, my son wouldn't want that. I will never sacrifice my life. And Zombie Son never asks for that. To be clear, he like hints or implies, because obviously he's the demon trying to get her to do this, but like never overtly says. So all of this comes from her, and a lot of it comes out of nowhere in my opinion. My patron may very much disagree. Perhaps my patron is more able or willing to read into things that aren't necessarily on the page with the character and give the character more grace than I give. I tend to be like, if you're not going to show me it, depending on the book, I can infer. Obviously, I can infer, and the author shouldn't treat me like I'm dumb. But at the same time, it's getting to the point where the character feels dumb for me, and I need to follow an intelligent character. She's going to be intelligent and grieving at the same time. And also, the boyfriend is infuriating because he's just like pretty willing to go along with this. And only at the very end does he attempt to prevent her game overing herself. And he does such a shit job. Like, no, sir, I wanted to just grab him and shake him and be like, sir, you need to take her in. You need to take her to a psychiatric facility because she is a danger to herself. And how he didn't understand that, maybe the demon was involved. It is implied that the demon does make him fall asleep so that she can go finally do this thing. But like before that, my guy, please see the writing on the wall. And he does. He just keeps being so hopeful that she's not actually going to do it. And it's like, oh my goodness. So both of these characters were just being a little bit too dense for me personally. And the writing didn't help either. I didn't love this author's style, and that is just a me thing. This author had a very telly style, so she would tell you how the character was feeling. The character felt sad, the character felt frustrated, the character felt angry, feel. And I prefer to be shown. Now, this author does sometimes do the thing that I have struggled with in the past, and still sometimes do struggle with in my own writing, where I will tell and then show. But then all you need to do to solve that problem is then, once you've finished showing, when you're editing, you go back and you remove that telling. So if I say she was feeling anxiety, and then I write about the anxiety and show the anxiety, then I can go back and cut out she was feeling anxiety. It's gone. Now I only have the showing. This book did both, and there was a lot of telling. The writing in this book also was a little bit too eager to show its hand too often. So we learned through the main character's internal monologue that she struggled to conceive. And one of the reasons that she was so close with her son was because it was a struggle to have him. Again, the theme of motherly sacrifice. She sacrificed and sacrificed her body, her mental health, all of that to have her son. And so that makes her even more inclined to A, be very, very, very close with him, and also B, to feel like she has to do even hard things to get him back. That's understandable. The problem for me was there was a beautiful scene late in the book where she's with her significant other, and she basically is like, hey, did you know that I struggled to conceive my son? And then she tells him the story. And that's a really lovely and effective scene. If we didn't already know the story because the narrative told us, save some of that so that we can have these really impactful scenes and learn things when characters learn them instead of just front-loading all of it. The mother also had similar problems where we're mostly just told about her mother occasionally and how horrible her mother was. And then her mother appeared for one scene just to have the catharsis of the lead character telling her off. And then she's gone again. And it wasn't impactful for me because we didn't actually see their relationship. We were just told. And then the mother shows up and the main character's like, fuck you, mom. You never cared about me. You never really sacrificed for me. And then the mother leaves again. And it didn't have the catharsis that I think was intended because I didn't feel like the mother was a real person. She was a hate sink. She was a plot point. She wasn't a real person that could push the main character onto the mistakes that she makes in the story. But of course, I always talk about the things that I didn't like, so what did I like? Well, mostly I liked the concept of this story. I like the idea of the grieving mother, of the Crossroads demon. I even really like the themes of sacrifice and mother sacrifice, and mothers going too far with sacrifice sometimes, which I don't think gets talked about enough. And while this book, yes, is about grief, I think it's even more about sacrifice and how mothers can get locked into this idea that they have to give all of themselves, even if they don't actually need to, and it's actually like worse in the end for their child if they do that. I liked that message, even if it fell a little bit short for me. It was still present, and I really liked it. I would have loved to have perhaps some juxtaposition of a different type of mother, just so we kind of had the three. I know that this book was short and possibly couldn't have supported it, so I'm not saying that I would have had to have this for this book to work, but something that could have worked is to have another example of motherhood to juxtapose the main character against, to maybe help hammer it in even more how her notion of toxic sacrifice is too far, is too much. Because we already have the toxic mother in her own mom, so could we have gotten maybe a female neighbor, a grandmother perhaps, who has had children who have been grown for a while and could reflect on how she raised them and how she chose to frame her own motherly sacrifice? It could have been just something that we could have thrown in there.
Alternately, we could have gone the other direction of perhaps the main character could have a friend at work who is a young mother who is starting out and has like multiple toddlers at the same time, and maybe the main character could be a little bit judgy of her. Maybe this woman isn't as like tuned in with her kids as the main character thinks she should be. Maybe she has a stay-at-home husband and he does more of the child rearing. So like we could have someone for the main character to maybe like bounce off of who also has a very different parenting style from hers, that we could see through her point of view, just to kind of really get like that range of motherhood. Obviously, like I said, this book didn't need it, but it would have been interesting to explore.
But ultimately, I really like the ideas on display in this book, and every now and then the author really would manage to be effective for me, but unfortunately, also this book fell short. Not in a horrible way. Like I said, didn't hate it, didn't give it 1 star. It's just a solidly mid book for me, and there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, I hope that my patron is not too disappointed that we have disagreed, because I know they really like this one. I believe they gave it 5 stars. But, you know, different strokes, different folks. By the way, though, before I do my outro, I felt I should mention that if you like contemporary horror-adjacent things, this is my supernatural thriller, Second Floor. It is set in my hometown, and it stars an author named Matthias, who is getting his first solo apartment in this ramshackle building full of strange inhabitants, and something supernatural and very, very bad seems to be growing on the 2nd floor where he lives. So, also, there's an orange cat in it. So, if you're looking for something short and potentially thrilling / supernatural-y to read, maybe check out 2nd Floor when you get done with Crossroads. That was my review for Crossroads. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Too little short for a stormtrooper?
Huh?
You want to know what's not short? My list of patrons. Patrons like Allison, Lisa, Jen, Tex, Moon Island, Zenith, Corey, Ashley, Bunny, Nemo, Tactical Hot Dog, Haley History Nerd, Stephanie, Pixelizzy, Raya, Christina, Cameron, Lady Kragan, Lunar Muse, AJ, Marshy, Semi-Dark, GK, Annika, Jen, Gay Tutter, Tina, Black Nanga, SB Boots, Martha Baggins, July, Bird Anonymous, Sarah, Kat, 78 Kilograms of Shade, Ingrid, Roma, Haley, Sam, Kira, Mooney, Pudamancer, Kirsten, Bear, Jojo Bookish, Robin, Ursula, Caitlin, Jessica, KJ, Mufflier, Celia, Deborah, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Marween, Kit, Hidden Glade, Light Julie, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Vampire Antihero, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, and Amanda. As always, all of you, thanks so much for your continued support. You make the magic happen around here.